Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Sarah A. Bosch-Jacobson, and I am the Barbara Rabin Chief Education Officer here at the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us for our 2024 Summer Survivor Speaker Series. Today, you will hear from second-generation survivor Julie Meetal Berman. She is the daughter of survivors Les and Magda Mittelman. Her parents were both born in Hungary, her father in 1919, her mother in 1923. During the war, her father was conscripted into forced labor for the Hungarian army, but escaped and joined a resistance group. Her mother and her mother's entire family were ghettoized before being deported to Auschwitz. Her mother was liberated in Germany, and after the war, she returned to Hungary in search of her family and in search of the man who would ultimately become her husband, Julie's father. They were reunited after a long journey to find each other, but I'll let Julie tell the story, and it's an amazing story. Before we begin, I would like to thank our community partners for the Summer Survivor Speaker Series, Dallas After School, the SMU Human Rights Program, and the Texas Holocaust, Genocide, and Anti-Semitism Advisory Commission. We are grateful for your support of the museum and our programs, and we couldn't do these types of programs without your help. I would also like to extend a special welcome to our board members, and volunteers in the audience. Again, we couldn't fulfill our mission without you and your support. If any of you here today are interested in becoming members of the museum or becoming volunteers, please visit our website at dhhrm.org to learn more. In just a moment, Julie will share her parents' story with you, and then we will have time for questions and answers. If you're here in the audience, you received an index card and a little golf pencil when you came in, so you can write any questions you might have on that. As Julie finishes up her talk today, we'll have staff come around and collect those from you. If you're joining us online, please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions, and we will filter those in as well. And we promise that Julie will get to as many of those as she can. I now ask you please to silence your cell phones. If you don't know how to do that, turn to the child next to you. They can do it for you. And we also ask that you refrain from recording today's talk. We are recording it, and it will be online on our YouTube fairly soon, in the next few days, so you will be able to rewatch it that way. And now it is my pleasure to turn things over to Julie Meetal Berman.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming out today and visiting the Holocaust Museums. I'm sure you all know how important it is today to learn from history so that we don't repeat what happened before. So like Sarah said, my name is Julie Meetal, how I go by it now, Berman, and I am a second-generation Holocaust survivor. So what does that mean? That means that both my parents survived the Holocaust, and since I'm their daughter, I'm considered a second-generation survivor. But this story is all about my parents. It's not about me at all. So here are my parents, Magda and Les Mittelman. Cute little couple, aren't they? I think they're cute. And that picture in the middle is one that was taken on their wedding day in 1945. So both of my parents came from Hungary. Hungary is in Eastern Europe. It's completely landlocked, meaning that it's surrounded by other countries. It's a fairly small country compared to Poland or Germany. And my mom came from a small city called Szolnok, and my father came from the second largest city in Hungary, Debrecen. My mother's side of the family was fairly poor. Both my grandparents had to work. My grandfather was a salesperson, and so he traveled all over Hungary. And my grandmother was a seamstress, so she made clothes for other people. Back in those days, we didn't have department stores, and people had to have their clothes made. So she was a seamstress. And the picture in the middle is of my mom, the younger one, and her older sister. My mom was about 5 years old there. And the picture of the group is my mom's side of the family at a wedding that was taken in 1939. Probably one of the last pictures that was taken before the war broke out. So life before the Holocaust in Szolnok, Hungary, was pretty much like everybody here's life. My mom went to school. She went to an all-girls school, and that's her class picture from 1939, 38. And although her family was not very religious, they would go to synagogue maybe once or twice a year on the holidays. My father's side of the family was a little better off than my mother's side. My grandfather had his own business. He made furniture. And many times after school, my father would go and help him out and learn the trade. Furniture making was in the family. My grandfather was a furniture maker. My great-grandfather was a furniture maker. Everybody was a furniture maker. And after the war, my father became a furniture maker again because that was the trade he knew. My grandmother was a stay-at-home mom. She had 3 boys and a daughter to take care of. And that picture in the middle is of my father and his 2 brothers and his sister and a couple of friends who were there. And life before the Holocaust for my father's side of the family was also pretty much like you. My father went to religious school. He also sang in the choir, but he mostly liked to play soccer. So he would usually not show up for choir practice and would end up playing soccer somewhere. And they went to synagogue services as usual for holidays, but they were a little bit more religious than my mom's, but not super religious.
Well, there's some...
Sorry. So before we go on to the next one, you're going to get to meet my father. So in 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and the war began. Hungary did not actually join the war yet. They were sympathetic to the Nazis. They were on the Nazi side, but they didn't actually join. But the first thing they did after Germany invaded Poland was that a declaration came out that all men age 18 and above had to enlist into the military. And soon after they all went into the military, all men who were Jewish had to start wearing a yellow armband so they can tell them apart from everybody else. And soon after that, all the men wearing the yellow armbands were taken away into forced labor, and they were shipped all over Hungary to start working in preparation for the time when at some point the Nazis would invade Hungary as well. So one of the first places that my father was shipped to was this small little town called Szolnok. And that's where the love story will begin. So now my father will be speaking and telling you about his time in Szolnok.
Well, there's sometime, where we were housing, there was a elementary school. And she had a friend maybe 2 blocks further. And they knew in the city a lot of Jewish boys there. So the Jewish girls, they came to visiting there. They sing, you need something, we can bring you, etc. There I met with her. And I was there about 10 months in Szolnok, and that's the place which is the most comfortable one, because I get a very good friend, one of the Hungarian sergeant, who knows I met with the girl and I want to go to visiting her, and sometime he take me out from the camp to let me go there, and he picked me up later to go take back to the camp.
So, even though Hungary was not actually in the war yet, anti-Semitism was getting very, very bad. So I'm sure everybody here knows what anti-Semitism is. As we see it raising its ugly head again today, in Hungary, it became a real problem too. So now my mom is going to talk about how she had to start wearing a yellow star.
We didn't the yellow stars. We had to wear the yellow stars, and we can go out on the street. My mother, everybody had to make by herself. My mother did it, and I was putting on my coat, on my dress also, because I get a job, and I went to work with my, with the yellow star.
So, like my father said, after about 10 months in Szolnok, his whole group, his whole unit, was shipped out and were taken to the Russian border with Poland. So this was the border where Russia, or the Soviet Union at that time already, and Poland had a border. And the Germans knew that at some point the Russians will try and come across that border to liberate Poland. So my father was taken there with his unit to do more slave labor. And this is the first place where he actually comes into contact with the Nazis. So in the next video, he's going to tell you all about that.
And there we get a German. And those Germans, they were taking us next to their barrack, and they used us for putting down mines. They signed up an area where we had to put mines there. They show us how to put, or cleaning mines. The first day experience what we had, the two boys blew up on that minefield, what they put them up. They didn't do that right, they were careless and stepped on the mine what they another one put it down, because they didn't mark them.
So one of the things that happened was that as they're going all along the border between Russia and Poland, the German in charge found out that my father knew how to build things, because he used to go and learn the skills from his father. And so the German in charge told him that one of their wagons, they used to carry all of their equipment and their ammunition and all the things that they had to move around on a wagon, and this wagon broke down, and he wanted my father to take it to the next little village and get it repaired. So he sent my father with a guard off to the next village that was close by, which was actually in Ukraine, and he sent him to a wheel maker or somebody who can help with repairs. And when my father got to his shop, the old man who owned it looked at my father and just started crying, like bawling. And my father said, "Why are you crying?" And the old man said, "Because you remind me of my son. And I haven't seen my son in 3 years. The Russian army came in here, they took him away, and I don't know if he's dead or alive." He said, "You come in here and sit down, and I'll bring you some food and some drinks, and I'll do the repair work for you." Well, my father had a great meal for a change, And the old man did the work, and just as he was about to send my father back to his unit, the old man said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And he took him to the front door of his shop, and he pointed out to the center of this town. And he said, "Do you see there in the middle of the town that hill?" He said, "That hill consists of 10,000 Jews who were brought here from the entire area, from the surrounding villages, from this village. They were brought here, they were forced to dig a ditch, and then they were shot, and then they were buried there." He said that hill did not stop moving for days. He said that hill will be here as a reminder to the people of this town and the surrounding area how they betrayed their neighbors and told them where the Jewish people lived. So here, I'm very lucky to have a couple of pictures of my father with his unit. You can see that he's wearing a Hungarian army uniform, and you can see on the arms of some of the other people that they're wearing a yellow armband to show that they're Jewish. So by now, it was 1944, and now Hungary decided to join the Nazi regime. And one of the first orders that came once the Nazis came into Hungary was that all the Jews had to pack a little bag and go to the ghetto. So the ghetto could have been a neighborhood, could have been a city block, could have been one building, depending on how many Jewish people lived in that town, depended on what the ghetto would be. So since Szolnok was such a small city, the ghetto was the school building. And here you can see how people are moving some items into the building on a little buggy. You can see a Hungarian soldier who looks pretty pleased with himself. And then you can see how they're boarding up the building. Once you're in the ghetto, you can't get out. You can't go to work, you can't go to school. You're given a certain amount of food, and quarters are very tight because everybody and their grandmothers are in there. So in the next video, my mom is going to talk about going into the ghetto.
First, that he was in Romania, and he saw how the Germans, they people, they picking up children and people on the street, from the street, throwing up on a truck, and they just taking it. And he told they will happen here too. Don't stay here. Go away from here. Where to go? Nowhere to go. And he told me that he's giving me an address in Berlin. And he told, go to Berlin. And I give you an address where to go. And I told him, I'm not going. I am not leaving my parents. I am going where my parents will go.
That was an encounter with a German.
And then one nice day, there came two policemen. And I told, you have to pick up all your things, not too many things, because you are going to the ghetto. So we picked up some bedside, bed things, a pillow and a comforter, and couple of things, dish, and on a little buggy, and we just pull it in the ghetto.
So after a few weeks in the ghetto, another order comes that says, you're going to be deported. You're going to be sent away. They didn't tell them where they're going, but they told them you're going to be sent away. And take your belongings with you. So here you can see a group of people being marched down the middle of the street. I think there's a German soldier on the side there that you can hardly see. But they're being marched down the middle of the street on their way to the train station. But what do you see on the side as these people are being marched down the middle of the street? What do you see there? See people standing around watching? They're standing on the side watching. Bystanders. Hey, I'm not Jewish. What do I care? Doesn't affect me. So these are their neighbors, their schoolmates, they're people they've known all of their lives. They're just standing there watching, letting these people just being taken away. And here they are at the train station, and you can see the looks on their faces. They're confused, they're scared, they don't know where they're going. They're being told nothing. They don't know if they're staying in Hungary or if they're going to another country or if they're going to their deaths. And you can see the train. So some people called them cattle cars, some people called them boxcar. My mom called them wagons. So in the next video, she'll talk about the deportation.
And nobody was telling us anything. And we was going with the second transport. The first transport went in Vienna. We didn't know that. The second transport went to Auschwitz. We didn't know where we're going. And we was in the train on this day and on the way to Auschwitz.
Were there other people on the train?
Oh, and the train was full. And the train was full with people. We hardly can sit down.
How old were you?
So I was 20. Well, they was rushing up us to the wagons. They was even pushing us up on the wagon.
Who was pushing you?
The Germans. And we was about in this wagon. I mean, there was about 5, which one going, or maybe more. We was about 100 people in this wagon, and there was also an old man on the other side in a wheelchair. They was putting on with the wheelchair, and we start to go. We didn't know where we going, but we just moved out, and we was about 3 days on the road was going when we saw a chimney, 2 big chimney in the distance, and they was burning. The flame was high up on the sky. And my mother told us that, well, I don't know where we're going, but you get ready that maybe we're going right in the flame. And I don't know why, but I just didn't feel anything. I saw the flame. I didn't feel anything. And then we went closer to the place. Then we smelled the flesh, the burning flesh. And finally, the train pulled in and stopped.
So I just want to point out that when she says they went for 3 days, that meant for 3 days, day and night, they're moving. The train is moving. There's 100 people in each wagon, in each boxcar. So you hardly have any room to stand. You can't sit down, you can't lie down. There's no food given, there's no water given, there's no facilities on the train. It's not like the trains today. So they're moving the entire time. Many people didn't make it just from the train ride. So now she's arrived in Auschwitz, and as you can imagine, everybody's confused. They don't know where they are. They're coming off the trains, and everybody's trying to look for their families, their neighbors, people they might know to figure out what's going on. And you can see in that picture, you can almost hear the Nazis yelling at them, telling them to get into order, into one side or the other. Men on the one side, women on the other. Notice how many more how many more women there are than men. Remember, I told you that all the men who were over the age of 18 had to enlist into the Hungarian military. So all you had left were the older people or the very young people. And you can see the confusion. They're all standing there wondering if they'll see their husbands, their fathers, their mothers, if they'll see them again. So now my mom's going to talk about the arrival.
They was all our relatives, and I was waiting until they coming down. And then I looked in and I saw the door open in the other side. And there was the flame. And the soldier who was open the door, they pushed down the wheelchair with the old man. And then I was running after my mother, and we, two of us, it was dark, it was evening, it was raining. And my mother picked some towels and we put on the head, and we started to going. When I looked back on the man's just still was standing there in the coat like my father outside. But when we went, it was light because all the reflectors was on. And I saw when we passed it, there was a hill of baby shoes. And right beside this, there was an older hill with eyeglasses. And I told to my mother, where we are going? And from distance, there was a fence, and the woman was standing there and hollering that give the babies to the mother, give the babies to your grandmother or your mother. But they was keep, hollering to us. And we passed this part and we went to a bathhouse. And then we went through all this cleaning of the hair on the body, on the whole body. Well, they was coming also behind us to the same place. But when we started to go, I was looking back. He was still standing there on the first lane in the men's section. And I saw my father. He was looking so sad and so poor with this long winter coat on him. And I just wanted so much to go back to tell him a goodbye. But they was rushing us. And we went in this bathhouse when they cleaned off us. And then after the cutting of the hair, we went to the shower. And when we came out from the shower, they gave us some rags to wear it, which one of them was this short, the other was this long. So we was trying to changing. So when we came out in a big room, there was the men's already, but very few men's came back from the shower. There wasn't more than a dozen.
So 2 things. In less than 2 months, Hungary deported 440,000 Hungarian Jews to Auschwitz. Of those 440,000, 320,000 were murdered just as they got there immediately. So when she talks about the showers, you didn't know whether you're going into, at that point they didn't know because they just got to Auschwitz. So they were told they're going into the showers. And so you didn't know if you were going to come back. She said there wasn't more than a dozen men who came out of the showers. That's because they were gassed immediately. So you never knew, once you were told you're going into the showers, you didn't know if you were coming out or not. So now she's in Auschwitz, and as you can see from the pictures, the accommodations aren't great. You're in barracks, you're on wooden beds, there are no mattresses, there are no pillows, there are no blankets. You're just, sometimes you have 3, sometimes you have 4 people in a cubby, and it's tight. Some people had to sleep on the concrete. There's nothing there to make your life comfortable. In the winter, there's no heat. In the summer, there's no air, obviously. And it's just, you just survive. And here on the right, you can see how there's a group of women. You can see how their head has been shaven. Everybody's was shaven when they first arrived. And they're wearing some kind of a uniform. So these women look fairly young, so they're strong, and they're able to work. They're given some sort of a uniform so that they can go work outside the Auschwitz camp. So in the next video, she'll continue talking about arriving in Auschwitz.
The selection, we went out on there was a big place before, right in the entrance, and they was taking at us, and naked. And then I saw first time Mengele, Dr. Mengele, and he was selecting. He selected out my cousin first. And she went on, and then couple of weeks later, they tried to do it to hurt us. On the holidays, there was always selection. On every selection, Mengele showed up. The second selection was about in Rosh Hashanah. And then they selected me. And we were sitting there on the Platz, upper Platz they called, and waiting for, to go. They take it to the, or in the shower, or right to the station. But usually they give it some normal dress before, they send it to a transport. So, but we were sitting there on the front of the entrance, and was waiting there, and I was thinking about my mother, that I leave my mother and my sister and my youngest sister. I always felt she was always very, very thin, and my mother always worried about her, and I was worried too, and I didn't want to leave them. And then I just jumped up and I started to running. And there was a German soldier who was a priest in civil, and a bunch of women around him and listening, his predication. And then I just crawled in the middle, and then saw the post who was after me. He lost me. So I went back to my mother and sister. And we was there until Yom Kippur, and there was an order selection, and they selected my sister. And then I was smarter because I tried to hiding. And they selected my sister, and my sister went. My sister was gone. Later, they was making a selection again. And every selection I was hiding. And I never was in my mind that they will select old people or not young people, because until this time they always was selecting the young people who they take at work, here and there and everywhere. And This time I was hiding, and my mother was on the selection. When I came back, I find out that my mother is not there. I was running out on the street and I saw my mother is marching, marching there with a bunch of women. They all has a white hair. And I started to running after her and hollering her, but I don't know, he didn't hear me. And I was keep running on the Blockeltester, who was responsible for everybody. She was running after me, and she was trying to find down me. And she told, you have to come back, and don't worry about the people. Don't worry about my mother, where she went. Then she was telling me that she by herself was taking her mother to the gas chamber. And it wasn't feel me better, I tell you the truth.
So now my mom was all alone. Her sister and her cousin had been taken away earlier, and the Germans were starting to get a little worried that the Russians were starting to come over that border where we left my father off. So they got 2 train loads of people, and they moved them from Auschwitz to another camp in Germany that's called Bergen-Belsen. So if you've ever read the story of Anne Frank was also on one of these 2 trains. And when my mom got to Bergen-Belsen, she found that the conditions there were even worse than they were in Auschwitz. A lot of people were dying of starvation. Sanitary conditions were horrible. But she found her sister and her cousin both there and still alive. But soon after that, the Germans decided to move people again, because by now we are at the end of 1944, 1945, beginning of 45, and now the British are starting to come from the west. And so they were worried that the British were going to try to liberate Bergen-Belsen. So the Russians are coming from the east, the British are coming from the west, and the Americans are coming from the south. So they decided to move people. And so when they moved them, they couldn't put them on trains anymore because trains became targets for the Allies to bomb. So they walked them. They forced them to walk. And they would force people to march through the woods, through the mountains, usually at night, but often during the day as well. And these were called death marches. So we're going to leave my mom there on a death march, and we're going to go back to where my father is. Remember, he was still on the Russian front and putting down landmines for the Germans. So as they're moving from one area to the other, another wagon breaks down. But now they're starting to move into Poland because the Russians are starting to come, so they're moving into Poland away from the Russians. And the wagon breaks down with all of their supplies, and the German in charge tells my father, you pick a couple of guys and you stay here at the side of the road and repair the wagon. We're going to go on. The rest of the group is going to go on, and when you're done, you just follow us. Okay? And my father said, sure. I'm no dummy. So they waited till they were out of sight, and the 3 of them took off. And they ran into a nearby woods where they came across a group of people. And these people told them that they are resistance fighters. They're partisans. And they fight and do anything they can to keep the German army back and allow time for the Russians, the Americans, and the British to come and liberate Poland. And he said, you can join us. You can fight with us, and we will help you. You will help us. So my father looked at his friends, and they all agreed that they're staying to help. And he found that in this group there were Russians, there were Germans, there were Polish people, there were Hungarian people. It was anybody who wanted to help. There were men, there were women, they were Jewish, Catholic, Christian. Anybody who wanted to help could join the group. So he joined the group, and now he became a resistance fighter. So the Russian army is coming through Poland, and as they're going and getting closer to the city of Warsaw, my father and his group were there, trying to keep the Germans back and giving time for the Russians to come. So now my father is going to tell you what happened there.
The Warsaw was under German occupation. Germans, they were there. The ghetto was burned already. And they knew it. We have to go in because the Russian getting close to the river, and another side, Wisla. That was the name of the river which is cut at Warsaw half. One side, that was name was the river Wisla. One side was Warsaw city, on the other side, some suburb or that one. So they expected there the Russian. We was planning to stay there on opposite side, the German side, to anything what we can destroy there. We were 18 people there. And we were hiding daytime in the houses, and evening we went out. The second evening, I was together with one of my friends, and the big guy, and with another, with Smith, and we was playing with the machine gun. We was set up with the machine gun. And the German patrol who came around there, and that's what we were holding them up. And we had to move back because they were coming up, the Germans, with the tanks. So we moved back about 5 miles from there, about 5 miles, about an hour and a half walk back in the forest, so not to find us. And there they had some small place, building, some kind of storage, something. We pulled them there to sit there during the daytime. The Germans, they know they have groups there around that city, which is guerrilla groups, and they want to get rid of it. And the German airplane, Germans took us, they came at daytime looking us. And they find that building because he turned back. And when we saw it turn back, we jumped out from the building, and some ditches closed there. We lay down there. They started to hit bombing that building, and they shooting machine gun. So that building, what we had, I just started. We went there when we got there to sleeping there. I took off everything, just the pants in the shirt I had there. And there I had the watch in my pocket that I get from my girlfriend when I met with her in Solna before we left. He gave me a silver watch, a flat one, what they were wearing in the small pocket. I left there, so the watch is burned there with my everything else. And we were lucky because we got away without any scratch with the German gun, and we tried to go back to the unit. So we got back to the basic unit, and the third day we went back to the Warsaw again, because every night a different group went there. So the third night was our tour to go there. So I went there, we were sitting on the top of the storage place, on a higher place, we were sitting there. And the Germans, they were patrolling, and they show us up there on the hill, on the top of the building, and they started shooting us. And we was replying there, and I was in the machine gun, and Sam, he was with me with the belt, which is the heavy, they call them, and the bullet to get into the gun. And a minute I was telling Sam, I don't get supply. I stuck. What are you doing? I looking at Sam. Sam had no head. They cut. They were shooting them with the machine guns, and I don't know, they was some kind of grenades, and probably that one of them cut his head. Just he had no hair, right next to me. Oh my God, I said, I had full bloody. And behind the building was my friend who was preparing to fill the belt with the bullet. I said to him, Reisner, let's go from here, because the gun is gone. We have no way where to stay here. And we tried to go, getting darker that day. We tried to go next to the building. We were laying down behind them. And we know we had a plan to 10 o'clock evening to get one spot where we're supposed to get together to moving back further. And evening at the evening, I said, no, right, we have to move. So we started to going slowly, and they were shoot up those candles, like with the air, the shooting up candles, which is coming back down with the parachute, and they light up the whole area. So when they shoot up, they picked up us with the light, and they started the shooting. The first cut, what they getting, I get hit. They hit me, my leg, a couple of places. My legs get hit from here down, and I couldn't stand up on it. And I am telling to my friend, Reisner, I can't stand on my legs. Would you help me to go try to get to the house? He said to me, you crazy. How can I help you? Everyone is going to die here. I can't help you. I can't help myself. And he left me there. So I was staying there. You know, the biggest wound was my knee. And I had to tear my shirt and try to clean in the top behind that, but I couldn't move. So I would stay there about get completely dark, and I tried to crawling from there. And again, you know, the candles went up in the air, and they saw me there, and I got a second time. And they shoot me that time on my arm, my head, and on my back. So I was there. I couldn't move. I was bleeding there, and I left there unconscious. And I waked up next couple of hours later, probably. They were carrying me. They're carrying me on the stretcher to Polak. They're taking me somewhere. And that time, I have to mention to you, I was wearing a Hungarian army uniform. What we was taking during the time when we were in the guerrillas. They were robbing one of the storage place what they had, the armies there. So they didn't know who I am. They know I had wearing a uniform, which is not Polish, not Russian. They know Germans, that's a Hungarian uniform. So they are carrying me to the first aid place. They took me to first aid place, and the two boys who they are carried the stretcher, they know me because they were part of there, but they got caught with the Germans. They caught him. And one of them is telling me in my ear, don't worry, Magyar. That's the way the Polak call the Hungarian. Don't worry, Magyar. M-A-G-A. Because we're not going to tell them who you are.
So my father was shot, 13 bullets across his body. They took him to this field hospital where a doctor tried to operate on him. And probably in his delirium and speaking in his sleep, the doctor realized that this guy is Jewish. And so the doctor kept him away from the German soldiers who were in that hospital and quarantined him. And the doctor would come every day, a couple of times, to change his bandages and to bring him food and nurse him back to health. But before my father could get all well, one night the doctor came and said, tonight after dark, I want you to climb out the window and leave here because we're going back to Germany. We're being sent back to Germany because the Russians will be taking over the city. So we're being shipped back. So my father climbed out the window on crutches and started to make his way back to Hungary. And that took several months. So now the war was coming to an end. The Allies, the Russians, the Americans, and the British were bombing Germany constantly, and it was chaotic. But remember where we left my mother? She was still on that death march, marching through Germany, going to who knows where. The Germans just wanted to move them to another camp or to another facility where they can kill as many Jews as they could. So now we're going to join my mother, and she's going to tell us how she was liberated.
Well, we was working in the factory until March. In March, they was coming the British, and we had to, move from there. I mean, they wanted to take back to Bergen-Belsen, so we went on the road to walk until Bergen-Belsen, but Bergen-Belsen fell to the English, to the British, and they can't take there. So we was walking to Bavaria.
Walking?
For the walking to the mountains, we was walking usually in the night, but sometimes we was walking on the day too. It was snowy and slippery and through to the mountain where it was terrible. My sister was all the time with me. I was watching her carefully. I was taking care of her how I can. And we arrived in Dresden station. When we arrived there was an air raid. On the Germans, they just closed the doors, and they ran to the bunkers in Germany, and in the middle of Germany. And we was praying in this weekend because this, we was up and down, jumping up and down on the first train, and then we went on the road, and we was going to a really wooded area, lots. I mean, not wood, trees area. Both sides of the road is trees, and we was going on. A friend of ours had an infection in the leg, and we was helping her on the two sides and carrying her little bag. And when we passed a little wood house on the side, then I went inside and I just pushed them out behind the little building. And we were standing there all the way until this whole big transport is passed by. We went in this village. We just picked up a house and we went in and we asked some food. And there this lady invited in and gave us some sandwich. And when we left, she gave us a bag cooked potato. And she came out to the door with us and she told, this way coming the Russians, and this way they coming the Americans. And then I told my sister, okay, let's go to America. And we went on this way, and we find 3 soldiers was coming on the bicycle.
So the war was ending, and everybody wants to go home. So everybody's trying to go back. You have American soldiers, British soldiers, Russian soldiers, you have German soldiers, people everybody's trying to get home, and it's pretty chaotic. There's no train systems because they've been bombed. And so they try to make it whichever way to get home. A lot of times walking, a lot of times a truck would pick them up. And so my mom was making her way back to Hungary. And when she got back to Szolnok to look for family members, she didn't know who survived. She was pretty sure her parents were gone, but her extended family she didn't know about. And so she was looking for anybody who came back. But before she started looking in all the different little towns where they used to live, she sent a telegram to Debrecen, to my father, in case he came back. She didn't know if he was alive or not. She just sent a note to him to say, "I'm back, come and get me." So at the same time, my father was making his way back to Debrecen to find out who came back. And the day after he got back, his mother and his older sister with a 5-year-old child came back, which was really a miracle because most of the elderly and the very young did not survive. But they survived in labor. They were working. And so he got my mom's note. And so the next day he hopped on a train and worked his way over to Szolnok. And when he got there, he found a note that said, "If Les comes, tell him I went to that town." And he went to that town. When he got to that town, he found another note that said, "If Les comes, tell him I went to this other town." So he hopped around following all her notes in all the different places that she went to until he finally caught up with her. And they were married the next day, and you saw their picture right in the beginning. So after the war, my parents tried to put their lives back together again. They had one child in Hungary, but 1949, Hungary became a communist country. And that was it. My father said, "That's it with Hungary, I'm done. We're getting out of here." So you don't just leave a communist country. You basically have to escape. So they had to escape with a 1-year-old through Hungary, through Austria, and then they had to make their way to Italy. And then from Italy, they made their way to Israel. Israel was a brand new country, 1949. Guess what's going on? There's a war going on. So first thing my father had to do was to join the military and help with the reestablishment of the Jewish nation. So I was born in Israel, and in 1964, my parents moved to the United States. And in 1983, my parents came to live here in Texas to join me and my kids. So in ending this story, I just want to leave you with a few words from my father. When he did this recording, he left a message at the end of it. He said, "I want to leave a message for anybody who might see this in the future." He said, "If you think that something like the Holocaust could not happen again, you're wrong. And if you think it can only happen to the Jewish people, you're dead wrong. And if you think it can't happen here in the United States, you're very wrong." He said, "You always have to pay attention to what's going on around you." He said, "You always have to question. You always have to verify. Don't just believe what somebody tells you. Do your own homework. Figure out what's real and what's propaganda." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. Okay, if you have index cards with any questions on them that you would like to have answered, please just raise the card in the air. There's one in the back. We will have staff and volunteers go around and pick those up. And in the meantime, I have some questions to get started with that have come in from people online. So, Julie, the first question that we have from an online viewer is, have you visited your parents' birthplaces in Hungary?
Actually, no. I've been to Hungary, but not to Debrecen or Szolnok. When my father was alive, he actually made me promise that I would never go to Hungary. And and never visit where he came from because he had such bitter feelings about what Hungary did to him and his family.
Then why did you go?
Huh?
Then why did you go?
I
Sneaky woman.
I know. I went for 4 days only because my mother, when she was 80, she wanted to go back and visit a cousin that was still alive. And so I went with her. But the stipulation was 4 days and that's it. We're out of here.
Okay. Were your parents aware of what was happening to Jews in Germany after Hitler came to power? And the other part of this question was there anti-Semitism in Hungary before the war?
Yes, there was anti-Semitism before the war. It's always been there. And they weren't aware. We didn't have media like we have today. There was no internet. The newspapers were all full of propaganda. You weren't getting the information. And so, no, they didn't. And my grandfather was in World War II. He was a soldier for the Hungarian army in World War II. And so he never believed that anything would happen to them. They always thought, we're good Hungarians. That won't happen to us.
Okay.
Didn't make any difference.
Do you know if your father was ever able to reconnect with any of the members of his partisan group? And then the other part of the question is, do you know if there's any record of the group that he was part of and what they accomplished?
Yes, there's actually several books about his group and that you can read about. It was called the Polish Home Army. And so you can find a lot of information about them. And one of the stories that I can tell you is that person, I don't know if you remember his friend Reisner, that he was stationed with, and they were shooting, and my father got shot in the knee and asked him to help him move behind a house. Well, Reisner survived, and one time while my parents were living still in Israel, my father was standing at a bus station and waiting to get on a bus, and he said, I kept feeling like somebody's watching me. And so he just looked around, and all of a sudden this man came running up to him. Turns out it was Reisner. And came running up to my father in just crying because he couldn't believe that he was seeing my father there alive. He was sure that he was killed, when he left him there in the streets. And he told him that he had had nightmares for years and years for leaving him there to die.
Wow. This is actually a very important question. Who was Dr. Mengele?
Oh. Yeah, I should have explained that. I don't know. Not everybody knows. So Dr. Mengele was known as the angel of death in Auschwitz. He was the physician that many of you, I'm sure, heard, that used to do all kinds of experiments on the Jewish people, on children, on women, on anybody. He would do horrific experiments on them without any anesthesia or any kind of painkillers. And he was just a horrible, horrible person. You can look him up too.
It's an even more interesting than that. He kept records. There were records, and he wasn't the only Nazi official who did experimentation on prisoners during the Holocaust. And there was actually a big ethical dispute a few years ago because the records came to light as to whether current medical science should be using information that was derived from fake experiments run on people who did not give consent. And as far as I know, they decided not to use the materials. But it's a whole other...
I'll tell you another little tidbit is that my mom's sister, the younger sister, who my mom talked about that she was so thin and they were so worried about. So she was, when she was selected during one of the selections, she was taken to Dr. Mengele's infirmary And she was very thin and very weak at the time. And so just by pure miracle, one of the nurses told him, don't even bother with her. She doesn't have long to live. So just because of that, she survived.
What languages did your parents speak?
They spoke Hungarian, so.
And English.
Oh, yeah, they spoke 3 languages, actually. So they spoke Hungarian, English, and Hebrew. And my father actually spoke quite a bit of Russian that he learned during the war.
Okay. Did your mother receive a tattoo at Auschwitz? And if so, do you know what the number was?
So Hungary was one of the last countries to deport their Jews. And by that time, they weren't tattooing because the Germans were in a hurry to kill as many as they could. So they weren't tattooed. So she was not.
Okay. 2 more questions. First question, what kind of food did your mother eat at the ghetto or the concentration camp? Do you know what she was able to get to?
They weren't given much food. They usually got soup, which was basically water, with maybe a potato in it. Maybe, if they're lucky, they would get 1 roll, a bread roll, which they had to save for an entire day or to share with others who didn't get. There was no diet there.
Okay. Final question, and then I have something to tell the audience and we'll wrap up. In the face of such detestable inhumanity, is there anything that gave your parents hope or confidence that the world afterwards would be better, or were they always worried and guarded after their experiences?
That's a good question. I think they were always guarded. Yes, they were always very aware. They always were, just like my father's message, to always check and double check and know where your information is coming from. They were always wary. And my mom, who suffered for many, many years because she survived. She suffered because she survived, and so many people didn't. And this was pretty common at the time. And so she was very depressed most of her life. But they had hope. They had hope once they came to Israel and they saw a new country being born, a Jewish, homeland being reestablished, and a new generation that was fighting for their own, so that another Holocaust couldn't happen. So I think they were very hopeful in that.
Okay. So I'd like to thank everybody again, and I'd like to thank you, Julie, for, as always, telling your parents' story should be a movie treatment. It's an amazing story. For those of you who would like to meet Julie, you're welcome. We're finishing up now. You're welcome to come up on stage and meet her. And I would invite all of you who are able to join us next Friday when Bert Romberg, who managed to get out of Germany with his sister on the Kindertransport, which was a train that took thousands of Jewish kids out of German-occupied territory to England, and they were able to survive the war that way, will be here to speak. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.